So bear with me for a moment. And we are recording, we are live. So with that being said, wanted to give all of you today a quick overview of today's session. So we have a fantastic opportunity to hear from two different men that are working in public policy right now. We have one that is working at Zipcar, and we have one that is a PhD candidate at Yale. So we have two different panelists that are going to contribute their background and experience to the conversation. I'd like to start by introducing Justin Holmes, Head of Marketing and Public Policy at Zipcar, and Justin Markowski, who is a PhD candidate at Yale. Thank you both for joining us today, and we can jump into our questions. So that's an overview of our panel conversation. So feel free, Justin, we have two Justins today. So we're gonna start with Justin H, if you don't mind giving us a quick introduction.
I would be delighted to. Good evening, everybody, and thank you to Rebecca for having me today. Again, as Rebecca said, Justin Holmes, I lead marketing and public policy at Zipcar. Maybe by like emoji or like chat. If you guys are Zipcar members or familiar with Zipcar, just let me know. I think we still have two cars on campus up by the Hogan Center. Thank you, Lucy, for the thumbs up. Zipcar is the world's leading car sharing network. And my job is to really help the business think about growth. My background, which I'll share a little bit more about in a minute, actually comes disproportionately from public policy. For Zipcar, we're one of those unique companies that does well and good at the same time. The more people that share cars, the fewer people that own them, and consequently, the less driving, less congestion, less pollutions, less emission, and less space that we need to take up on campuses and on cities where we operate. So the work that we do has positive social and environmental outcomes, which is actually quite attractive to policymakers. And so we've been successful over time in working directly with policymakers to find ways to help grow the impact of our business and help really spread car sharing to more places and to more people. And that includes growing on campuses like Holy Cross, but it includes work with big cities like Boston and New York that really help incentivize our growth with favorable public policies. So I lead the team that does that, also lead the team that thinks about direct marketing and sales and partnerships. So always happy to chat more about that. In terms of my background, somewhat unique for someone who is effectively the CMO, the lead marketer at Zipcar, because I came mostly from government. I was attracted to work in government mostly because Holy Cross ruined me for life in that they challenged me to think about doing good for the world. And consequently, that led me to a path starting really in local government, where I got exposure to all sorts of incredible public policy formation, but more importantly, public policy action, trying to do good work to help people. And that led me to my career today at Zipcar for some of the reasons that I mentioned, because we do really interesting, attractive work with cities. So happy to talk more about my career, how I got started. Right after I left Holy Cross, I actually had the good fortune to work in Europe, in Geneva, with a nonprofit organization, an NGO, doing work with the UN on human rights. And happy to share more thoughts on that. If you think government works slow, a government works slower than that. So learned a lot about that, but it was incredible work and great to be exposed to international policy making as well. With that, I will turn it back maybe to Rebecca, and I think Justin M is up next.
Yes, Justin M, you're up next.
Great. Well, I want to echo Justin H's comments about thanks and gratitude to Rebecca for inviting us and organizing this session. I'm really excited to be here. So my background is really complementary to Justin H's in many ways. So I'm in the health and social policy space. I got my start at really small, and then slowly my career has just been this trajectory, building up and asking bigger and bigger questions and trying to grapple larger and larger problems until I find myself where I am today. So right now I'm finishing up my PhD. I'm a senior, I guess you could say, as I'm on the job market, and I'm finishing up in May, which I'm really excited about. So I'm looking for policy jobs now, actually, and hope maybe even some academic positions, which is actually where I'd like to see myself. my work really focuses at that intersection between health policy, social policy, where I think a lot about our healthcare and social safety nets. And I use analytical tools and the latest data science toolkit to really evaluate and improve our systems as they are designed in the US. So it's really exciting. Work time now. I mean, you turn on the news, you hear something every day about healthcare or Medicare for all, or some change, and now the government shutdown. So there's a lot to work on, and I find myself just gravitating toward these sorts of issues. And much like Justin H, Holy Cross ruined me in the sense that I knew that like I needed to work on problems to make the world a better place and do my part. And I'm sure based on Rebecca's future questions that we'll talk about it more. So I don't want to talk too much about my background at Holy Cross, but it was really this like foundation of men and women foreign with others that really spoke to me and I knew wanted to be a bedrock of my career. So that is, and now I'm a national expert on the healthcare safety net. I consult for safety net hospitals across the country, and I write academic papers that are policy oriented and really trying to answer some of the most pressing issues. I have one that's coming out in November that's we're a little nervous is going to make some people mad, but that's okay because if it exposes a problem and tries to find solutions, that's what we're really here for. So thank you again for inviting me.
Great. Well, thank you both for those wonderful introductions. I thought at that point it segues to our first question, which is going to be, what did you major in and why did you select that major while you were at Holy Cross? And this is for both of you.
I'm happy to start. I was a political science major at Holy Cross. Why did I select it? I had an interest in government and in politics, and so really wanted to understand how that all worked. It was an incredible experience for me. I also took a ton of classes in sociology and religious studies to sort of balance out, I would say maybe like a holistic set of thinking about how to help systems, government, people improve their lives and improve their communities. So I had an incredible experience, and that's part of, I think, what led me on the journey I'm on today.
It makes sense. Political science, connections to government relations and public policy. So Justin M., what did you major in?
I did not major in political science or economics. I majored in chemistry, which is a little odd for a policy person today. So while directly my coursework then didn't prepare me for anything that I do today, I think that the robust liberal arts nature of our curriculum really is something that just has absolutely laid the foundation for my current success. There's no doubt. But so the reason why I did chemistry, health professions in preparation, I was thinking about medical school at that point. So I was thinking, oh, that'll be the way that I'll be able to contribute to the world. And then my worldview started getting broken down and rebuilt with every class at Holy Cross that I took, such that I realized that the world is a lot bigger and the problems require bigger solutions and systemic solutions. So I realized that medicine is not for me, that I want to work on the policy and the systemic side of things. So that it's really that combination of factors that led me to where I am today, for sure, at least oriented me in this direction.
Great. Yeah, I would say a lot of times we say this in the Center for Career Development ourselves, that liberal arts education that you receive, being a critical thinker, being able to write, being able to speak publicly, these are skills regardless of if you're a chemistry major and you find yourself moving into public policy later. These are skills that are transferable to a wide variety of different industries and spaces. So thank you for that feedback. We are also wondering, what did you do at Holy Cross beyond your classes, if you can call back to those days?
Justin M., do you want to take that first, or do you want me to?
Sure. I was gonna the reason I'm laughing because I was gonna say make friends who last forever, but no, that's probably not the answer we were looking for. Or maybe it is, I don't know. But no, I would say that it's a great community, and the friends who I made in college are still I'm in the midst of planning a wedding, and they are most of my wedding party is made up of Holy Cross alum, which is fantastic. So we're going to be one of the pictures in the magazine, so keep an eye out for that for sure. But no, other than that, I did, as a chemistry major, I did research and I did sciencey things, and that was most of my day for sure.
Cool. And I was actually pretty involved on campus. I did a bunch of campus community service stuff. I don't know if SPUD is still a thing on campus, but back then it was an entirely student-run organization. So me and a classmate were co-chairs of SPUD for I think my junior or senior year. Now I can't remember. I did the Washington semester program, which is super fun, and then helped build organization that did a lot of on-campus advocacy. At the time, like labor conditions were a big issue in the world, particularly as a lot of global manufacturing was on the rise. Maybe a little bit older than you guys, but this is when people were starting to really scale manufacturing in places in the two-thirds world like China and offshore. And so we were really concerned about the stuff that we sold in the bookstore and the coffee that we sold in Cool Beans, and wanted to make sure that it was produced under responsible working conditions. So we did a ton of work with a small student group around that as well. And I hope that's still the case, that the stuff you buy is sweat-free, and the coffee that you drink is shade grown, responsibly raised, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a lot of fun.
SPUD and Cool Beans are still very much around. And I would say some students could maybe speak to where the coffee is roasted, but still very much a presence on campus. So the next question that we have for both of you is, how did your journey lead you to your current roles, both at Zipcar and pursuing health policy and management at Yale? And were there any significant events that shaped your path along the way there?
I would say certainly the answer is yes. Like in terms of significant events, I'm happy to highlight some of those. I would say in terms of my career journey, I sort of mentioned this already, which is that I was very fortunate to have a bunch of different roles in government. And, you know, what that taught me, I think, was how policymakers and in particular political leaders think, how they make decisions. And that helped me think about in an environment like Zipcar, which is Zipcar.com, not Zipcar.gov, but fortunately I work for a very socially responsible company. But it helped me think about and prepare for ways in which I could help influence and shape policy. So I would say for me in my role today, having spent a big chunk of my career in government, embedded with policymakers, understanding their challenges, understanding how they think, was quite helpful. I would say in terms of significant events, certainly having internship opportunities like I did after college. It was a Holy Cross connection that I ended up at in Geneva at the UN. That was a pretty significant event that is still a talking point as I talk to people about my career journey. You know, in terms of advice for you all, you know, my career and maybe Justin would agree, you know, your career is a game of addition, not subtraction, and you continue to acquire people and experiences throughout your career journey that will be helpful to you. And, you know, a lot of, I think, successful careers are built on just simply maintaining that network of relationships, maintaining the story around those experiences that you've had. And so I would say a red thread for me is I was very fortunate to work for some incredibly bright political leaders, some incredibly talented folks in government. And maintaining those relationships has been quite helpful to me in my career, because I think if you build a degree of trust in people that understand how you work and value your contributions, that gets you a long way to building and growing your network, which ultimately I think is a successful way to build a career. So I would say that's probably some of the key moments for me.
Thank you.
I totally agree with that about building out your network slowly but surely, making that a conscious decision, 100%. I actually write a letter I try every 6 to 12 months to old advisors and mentors who've accompanied me along the way. Not only it's good for them because, you know, you lose touch with students so often or former employees very quickly. So I make a conscious effort to like keep them in the loop and like just give a quick message. And I think it's been incredibly helpful. It's been fulfilling for me to hear how they're doing, but also bring them along with you along that journey, which has been great. One of whom, and in terms of like significant events, I would say it's been a collection of significant events that are smaller in nature. So for me, one of my first turning points was definitely like actually senior year at Holy Cross was Professor Shannon Stock's statistics class, where I thought statistics was just about like aggregating numbers. Little did I know that it was about like leveraging data to like solve problems. So I thought that like, and she's one of the mentors who I still keep in touch with every once in a while. But she was but that class like just changed the way that I saw the world. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to now use data, and that could be a powerful tool to like expand my impact. So that was one. Another time after I did a master's degree at Yale first, then took a break to work, and I worked at a community health center, which just like completely transformed my world and really expanded the way that I see it and exposed me to like the actual challenges on the ground. And I feel like dare I say, like the concept of like boots on the ground can be a little daunting, but like making sure that you understand the way the world works before trying to fix it is really, really important, especially in policy, because if not, you're either going to get laughed out the door because someone else knows that you don't know what you're talking about, or you're going to come up with a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, or worse, a solution that actually further exacerbates the problems that you're trying to solve. So I think that like actually working in one of these like safety net centers just completely paved from like it put gas on the fire, so to speak. So I think that those are like two turning points that really like help me orient and hone my direction.
Well, if I can, I'll just double down on that because I could not agree more. You know, for me, very early parts of my career were getting involved in my neighborhood, in my community. I grew up in Boston and, you know, started showing up to civic association meetings so I could understand, you know, what was important to my neighbors, and showing up to neighborhood cleanups, and then ultimately like organizing neighborhood events like that, you know, was really how I got my initial start in government 10 years later. Once I graduated high school and college, you know, I was close to some of those same neighborhood civic leaders. Some of them had political connections. I got involved in campaigns and grew my career that way. And to Justin's point, you know, having built up that credibility as someone who did a lot of the work, who understood what was happening quite literally on the ground in a lot of neighborhoods, and then someone who took responsibility quite later, you know, for helping the city respond to issues and events at a much larger scale, gave me, I think, a lot of that context, that credibility, that authenticity to do that work even better. So totally agree.
Thank you both for sharing your experiences. So the next question that we have for you both is if you could share one or two skills from your academic backgrounds that have been particularly valuable in your careers.
I think you highlighted them definitely in the beginning, but I will reiterate, I think that the liberal arts education, I never thought that I would be writing as much as I do today, and I'm not a natural writer. So I think that the training and foundation I got at Holy Cross definitely has helped me through that. I'm naturally, in case you can't tell, a bit of a data nerd, and I thought that I would be just working with data all day, but instead 80% of my time is communicating and learn, and you know, through the written word, physically in person, making speeches and whatnot, and or making presentations in front of stakeholders is actually like the majority of my work. So I think that like that foundation has been absolutely necessary.
I could not agree more. Justin stole mine. Writing for sure. I would add only to say I think an ingredient to become a really good writer is not only the foundation that you get at Holy Cross, but to become a good writer and to continue to be a good writer, I think you need to be a good reader. And so I think one of the things that I found important is reading regularly, reading a variety of different sources to stay close to what is happening in the world, or what is happening in your profession, or what is happening in a subject that you're tracking closely from a public policy perspective. Being a lifelong learner, I think, is certainly something that Holy Cross teaches you, and a liberal arts education really instills in you. And I would agree on the skills, like being a good writer actually is shockingly rare in the world that we live in. I deal with incredibly smart and very talented people, not all of whom share the same background and training that we do in helping, no matter what your discipline is, like get your writing really sharp and clear. And I think particularly in, it sounds trite, but like in this age where people are moving so fast and where there's a variety of social media tools, the gift of good writing is to learn how to synthesize a complex subject and do it very simply and very clearly. And that has never been more important and never been more urgent than it is now, when the landscape of media and the landscape of social media tools that bombard most consumers, most humans today, is just so vast. So having the gift of being able to cut through the clutter with clear, concise writing, I think, is really important. In order to do that, you got to be a good reader. You have to practice that behavior, I think. For me, that means like I read about 1 or 2 newspapers every day. I subscribe to a bunch of different professional newsletters that I read every day to stay in touch with the topic, but also to help me become, over time, a better writer and consumer of information too.
Great. Our next question. Oh, go ahead. Feel free.
Right. So just very real quick, you can also sign up for Google Alerts, which I highly recommend. So like plug in keywords. If you know that you're fascinated by a topic, make sure, I get emails every day from like scholarly publications in my field, as well as like non-scholarly publications as well. There's ways to like leverage technology. I'm also on Twitter, which is actually going to surprisingly, once you sift through the nonsense, which there's a lot of, you can find some gems. It's been incredible with finding by knowing who to listen to, you can know what source to like you find, just get exposed to so much more high quality material. I'm sorry, I just wanted to like put a pitch out there for like technology too.
No, I think that's great. There's so many different ways to gather your news sources. So I think Google Alerts is a great way to stay on top of information. Fabulous. And my next question was for you anyways, Justin M. And that is, how do you see diversity in healthcare and in the public health sector, and how has that influenced your career?
So it's definitely critical. Healthcare affects everyone, and we all have to use it. And health is something without which I believe is just, it needs to be, I know that I'm not being very eloquent right now, but health is critical and is oftentimes a zero order condition in order to have every other thing in life happen. And without it, it makes living very difficult. So I think that diversity is necessary and is inherent to the systems that we build around ourselves. And particularly in my work on the safety net, there needs to be this sort of broader perspective that we need to embrace, and we need to be inclusive, and we need to build systems that are responsive to the needs of different communities, and therefore you need representatives from different communities to be at the table and to have a voice on those topics. And I think without that, then we're going to end up with systems that very quickly become inequitable, unfair, and approach a level of injustice that violates the very tenets of our Ignatian education, really. So I think that making sure that you pay attention to the world, and with everything you do, you ask questions about equity, they need to be a necessary part of policy, and I challenge you all to do so.
Thank you, Justin M. And so for Justin H, wondering if your work environment and industry is diverse, and how your experience at Holy Cross or across your career has helped you work effectively in diverse teams.
Yeah, it certainly has. And I would answer that in 2 dimensions. One is my field now is really transportation. And transportation is for some people the number one barrier to upward social mobility. If you can't move, you can't get a car, you're not near public transit, you can't get a job, you can't go to school. And so it really is that underlying sort of connectivity that helps enable people to advance their lives, their families, their careers, et cetera. And so thinking about equity and transportation is a really big part of my work today. Zipcar was built as a brand initially that people saw as enabling people who could afford to own a car, choose not to, but live a more holistic lifestyle in a city. They walk, they bike, they run, they use transit, and when they need a car, they use Zipcar. And what we've learned over time is that Zipcar is actually a critical ingredient for people that can't afford to own a car. So for some people for whom the high cost of car ownership is out of reach, for most people, it costs about $10,000 to $12,000 a year to own, maintain, insure, fuel a vehicle. And for a lot of families, it's out of reach. But you need one sometimes to get to a job interview, or you need one to get to the grocery store. And so these important equity considerations underline a lot of our work today. I would say in terms of diversity in the workplace, it's certainly incredibly critical having diversity of thought, having diversity of backgrounds, having diversity of experiences, has been proven to yield better, smarter, more enduring outcomes for business, for the world. And so it's something that we take very seriously. We think a lot about. We started at Zipcar a couple of years ago, employee resource groups that are really employee-led centers of culture within our company community, within our corporate culture, that really help people educate the employee base about their unique culture, whether it's the group that I am the executive sponsor of, our LGBTQ organization, or whether it's our Power of Color employee resource group. We do a lot, not just, I would say, to celebrate diversity, but to help educate the organization about not only the challenges that some of our employees face in the workplace, but some of the opportunities that our business, our company, our brand can leverage in order to make the world better for the communities that we serve. Zipcar is, again, has a very diverse membership base. And so it's important for us to reflect the diversity and respect the diversity of the communities that we serve. So it's a really incredible part of business. In terms of how Holy Cross prepared me, I would go back to critical thinking and learning how to work and behave and manage different cultures. I was a white Irish kid who grew up in Boston, and certainly there were a lot of people that looked like me at Holy Cross, but there were a surprising amount of people that didn't, and a surprising amount of people that I got exposure to as a result of doing things like working with Spud and getting the chance to travel and interact with different cultures. And that liberal arts foundation of asking critical questions, challenging assumptions, consuming knowledge and digesting it, I think is really critical to approaching important work in diversity as well, no matter what your context.
Well, thank you both for your very thoughtful responses on that. Our next question for you both is, what soft and technical skills do you consider to be essential in your respective fields?
I mean, I'm guessing Justin M. has a lot more technical skill set in the healthcare world. I would come back to a theme that we've been repeating, in my world, whether it's in, lobbying or doing government affairs work for a company, or whether it's in communicating our value to consumers or to partners. Being an effective communicator is critical. And I think that's a skill that underlines everything. We talked a lot about being a good writer. Rebecca mentioned being a good public speaker. I think that is an important skill that you acquire mostly through practice. And so I think getting the opportunity to present, whether it's in front of a classroom, whether it's in front of a student organization, is really good practice that will help you become a more comfortable public speaker over time. I know that's a top fear for a lot of people. And again, it only gets better with practice. So I would strongly encourage you to do that. But as I said before, I think, no matter what audience you're speaking to, whether it's an audience of one, that you're selling to, or an audience of one policymaker that you're communicating to. The gift of taking complex information, taking an objective view of facts, and being able to communicate that concisely and clearly is really important, no matter what the medium, whether it's written, spoken, PowerPoint, anything. I think that's a really valuable skill that will serve you well, no matter what industry, no matter what discipline you're in.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with that for sure. All those points, especially that last bit about being able to distill complex ideas and communicate them simply is I mean, if you can master that, you can rise that. No, really, you can master anything because it's that difficult, but also it is that important because that's how you can build coalition. You can get movement behind ideas when you can communicate them really, really clearly. So definitely those are like the top soft skills. Your Justin H, your supposition about healthcare being rather technical is definitely true. There's a steep learning curve in healthcare, especially if you don't have clinical training, which I do not. But that said, on top, so like there are like a discrete set of technical skills, just learning the language of healthcare, the language of social policy. They tend to be really specific, but you kind of pick that up along the way. What I would advocate for is some amount of data literacy. I'm not saying that you need to be a computer scientist necessarily, but you do need to be data literate because you need to know if someone's trying to pull the wool over your eyes, and you need to be able to generate some sort of intuition about these things. You want to, if you're trying to evaluate someone's ideas or you're trying to present ideas, you need to be able to do that and be at least comfortable with how to use data and how other people will use data either against you or in support of your ideas, because some of these issues in policy, they don't have clear answers. So you're going to have to, someone can take the same source of information and come up with drastically different insights and different responses and even opposing responses. So I would recommend that is like my big recommendation on that for sure.
Data literacy. And I think we keep hearing data science, data analytics, data literacy, but I think that base level of data literacy sounds very important for all fields that students plan on entering. The next question that I had was for Justin M. And that question is, in what ways does a career in public health and policy align well with your personal and professional goals, and for whom might it be a less suitable fit?
This is a tough question, just because it's, how do I say it? It implies that I know where I'm going with my career, and I'm not certain that I know exactly where I'm going. I have a sense, but I might be better suited once I have a full-time job, and hopefully in about a year that I might be able to answer that better. But no, no. So I think that said, I think that for someone who really cares really passionately about health in general, or health is also a really interesting way to get into like social policy as well, which is sort of this nebulous concept. Also, so like health could be your entry in there where you start saying, okay, we care about health because we care about folks' general well-being as well. We care about things like nutrition. We care about things like education. So health could be a good way to sort of parlay into that. But I think that this is really for folks who care. But if you're not like grounded in this sense of like, no, health needs to be at the center, then I would recommend against it. And how do I say it? I think overall, it's generally a welcoming field and an interesting overlap at the intersection of like government and public health, which is a discipline in and of itself. But I think for folks, yeah, that's what I'll say. Yeah, folks who want to center health, this is definitely an option for you. And for folks who don't want to become an economist, that's the other option. Yeah, no, definitely that.
Great, thank you for that, Justin M. And for Justin H, how did you present yourself on paper and in interviews when securing your first job after Holy Cross?
Well, for me, it was a while ago, so that I'm not sure that I exactly remember. But if I try to go back and think about it, I would say this is certainly something that I've also learned over my career. often when people are putting together resumes or they're in job interviews, people default to talking about their, responsibilities or their skills. And what most interviewers, I think, really want to know is more about your experience, in the sense that of what did you learn as a result of your experience? What impact did you have? How did you contribute to making your company, your organization, your school, whatever your experience is that's relevant for that job? What was your contribution in making that better? And so I think the shift for me was in trying to really tell that story for the impact that I had at the time on campus, the opportunities that I had to help, again, gain learning and gain experience, and how that translated into some of the skills that I thought would be necessary in my job. For me, my first job, again, was working in human rights in Geneva. And I was fortunate that I had, really helped, as I mentioned before, with a small group of students, do some work around anti-sweatshop campaigns and fair trade coffee. And so being able to talk to those experiences and what I learned and the impact that we had was quite helpful. It's not always that linear. And I would say, the part of the trick of getting your first job isn't just doing well in the interview, it's getting the interview. And I would strongly encourage unpaid pitch, by the way, talking to folks like Rebecca and in the career development office, because Holy Cross has an incredible network of people like the Justins here who are very willing to offer their advice, their perspective, to lend their connections to fellow students. And that is often just as important, getting in the room, as how you use that time effectively in a resume or in the interview itself.
And thank you for the plug, Justin
You're
H.
welcome.
I would say one of Holy Cross's biggest strengths really is our alumni network and our networking connection. So this is one of those things where you can always schedule an appointment with us, and we are happy to show you how to connect with different alums on LinkedIn and on HC Connect. So I think
down on that, I found that to be incredibly true, even in Boston and the political world. We're outnumbered by people from BC and sometimes folks from Harvard, but what we lack in numbers, we make up for in passion and connectivity. There's probably not a month or two that goes by that I'm not invited to some like downtown businessy breakfast by some Holy Cross alum, either someone I went to school with or someone that looks out for other Holy Cross alums. And I think we all have this sentiment of helping to pay it forward. So it's absolutely true.
great.
Totally.
And I think that you've both done a great job talking about how you leverage your liberal arts education in your current roles. So I think our last question for this evening is an orientation to the future. And what emerging trends or issues do you anticipate in your respective fields, and how can students prepare for them?
So healthcare is changing. It's going through an absolute transformation right now. You hear there's the transformations you hear. I mean, you hear Bernie Sanders talk about Medicare for all and what does that mean? But there's also the transformations that you can't exactly see. There is this digitalization, this use of technologies really becoming moving to the forefront in healthcare. And of course, I know that data might be the theme of the evening, but I don't want it to be the center, but it's important, right? About every year, there's a doubling of the amount of healthcare data in the country. And that information needs to get processed and understood by smart folks like you all to be able to, glean insights and make the world a better place. So there's really these like trains moving down that it's not exactly clear how they're going to collide, but they will at some point. And we need folks who are armed and ready and able to help like tackle those challenges really. So it's really exciting, but also really daunting at the same time.
I would say for me in the transportation sector, whether you're a policymaker or whether you're on a researcher, academic, or whether you're in the corporate side of the world, there's like three macro trends that are happening in the transportation landscape that are good to be on everyone's radar screen. One is connectivity, and that is, whether it's vehicles to infrastructure or vehicles to other vehicles or systems. There's a lot more integration that's happening. 20 years ago, if you lived in the city, your options were you walked, you biked, or you got on a train. And now there are services like mine, like Zipcar, services like dockless scooters, and increasingly those services are being knit together to help create more end-to-end transportation solutions for someone. So connectivity, I think, is one. Electrification is the other, for both a lot of good, responsible climate goals. There's been massive amounts of investment, particularly here in the US, in growing electric infrastructure and encouraging more automakers, more bus transportation folks, more freight, even airlines to help think about sustainable fuels and in particular electrifying. And that is a trend that is not going away. We're seeing right now, we're living in generational level investments in growing electric vehicle infrastructure. We're at the beginning stages of that. So if you have an interest and a passion for sustainability and have an interest in transportation, now is a great time to be learning and acquiring those skills. And the last one I would say is automation. Someday in probably my lifetime, certainly yours, that cars will drive themselves. And I think that is an incredibly disruptive trend. We're seeing that literally happen today in places like San Francisco, where there are two companies that are vying for automated vehicle technology. And that's disruptive for a bunch of different reasons. And it may not necessarily be for good ones. And that's not because I think robots are going to take over the world. It's more, I think we have to think downstream about the congestion impacts of having fleets of cars that are driving around with no one in them in cities, and what that might mean for the kind of cities that we want to design in the future. So I think the world is going to need smart, thoughtful people like you to help create the regulatory environment to make sure that these emerging and potentially disruptive technologies have the impacts that we want them to have. And if I have 30 more seconds, I would say the other trend that all needs to be on every radar screen is AI. I know that's a topic du jour. You guys are probably learning a lot more than I am about it because you're in a classroom environment. But I think that is potentially groundbreaking, disruptive technology on the likes of which the internet was, for someone in my generation. And so I think paying attention to how AI trends evolve, the upsides and the downsides, I think are going to be incredibly important and disruptive. And I would say, there's a professor, a business professor, I think at Columbia, that says it's not necessarily that AI is going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will take your job. And so understanding how to leverage that technology as you enter the workforce is going to be important because it will make you a superhuman. I have no doubt.
Great. Well, thank you both for reflecting on future trends in your industries. And now I will turn it over to the future generation of working professionals. So this is your time, students that are attending. If you have any questions for our panelists, Justin M. or Justin H., please feel free. You can type them in the meeting chat, or you are also welcome to come off of mute, introduce yourself, and ask your question to our panelists. So I'll give you all a few moments if you'd wanted to ask any specific questions. Maybe it was such an engaging conversation that we've covered just about everything there is.
I have no doubt.
Yeah. While we're waiting, if I could piggyback onto Justin's last point, I would also recommend some of the big consulting firms like McKinsey tend to put out like really quick briefs about really hot issues. So if you see something that comes across your radar, or comes across the news, and you're like, I wonder what they have on there. These firms like Boston Consulting Group and Bain will oftentimes put out little think pieces, white papers or so. Could be a good way. It's a very different take than anything that you might be reading in class from like an economics journal or something like that. But it is an interesting quick hit there where they're trying to be responsive and on the cutting edge, that it might be worth your time perusing through, I would say.
All right, last chance up. We do have a few questions that have come through. So thank you, everyone. So a question from Shay is, what have been setbacks or tough moments in your career and how did you overcome them? Great question.
That is a great question. Trying to be thoughtful and reflect on it. I would say, there are certainly opportunities that I went for that I didn't get, and those often feel like setbacks or disappointments. I would say I was talking with someone recently who reminded me, what is it that you call when you don't get what you want? We call that, I think, experience. So I think behind every potential setback is an opportunity to learn. And so whether that's, in my case, there were a few roles that, I thought I was perfect for, but I didn't get. I used that as an opportunity to really help learn, follow up with the interviewer, the folks that I was working with, understand what could I have done differently? How could I position my candidacy differently? Or what experience do you think I didn't really have, but that if this is of a long-term interest to me, that I could go back and acquire? And so I think not only taking that as a moment for self-reflection and learning, but using that as an opportunity to invite feedback. I actually truly believe that all feedback is a gift. Sometimes it just, it's hard to receive at the right point in your career. But I would strongly encourage you to actively seek feedback from people. And I think that's especially true during moments that feel like perhaps like setbacks in your career.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice.
Great. Anything you wanted to add to that, Justin M., or I can turn the next question over to you?
So I think I almost want to answer both questions at the same time, if I could, or at least respond to. So I think that what I wish that I had known, and led is because I had a setback. So I wish that I had known that there are different types of mentors out there, and not all of them are great. And oftentimes, some of them are actually quite bad. So I wish that I had known that finding the right mentors was something that was actually really important. And I thought, oh, I can go through, I'll be able to I kept hitting walls in my career. There was one point in time I was actually, I didn't have a job for 3 months after graduating from my master's degree, my first time. And I was getting really bad feedback, and I didn't know that I was getting bad feedback at the time. And it can be hard to differentiate, but I realized that there was some, there was some other stuff that I don't want to go into necessarily, but I will say this, that making sure that you have mentors who are backing you 100%, giving you honest advice that they're not just talking out of their cheek. I don't know how else to say that politely, but yeah, they're not just, blowing smoke, that they're actually speaking to you, to your needs, and want your best interests is really, really important. And without it, I'm not certain that I'd be here today, but it is thankfully because I found great mentors that I've been able to grow into I guess myself. So it's great.
I also think that is great advice to answer. I think it's Lucy's question. The other thing that I might add is you have a lifetime to figure out what you want to do with your life. And I think there's so much pressure. And I remember feeling that when I was sitting in the seat that you all are currently in. I was graduating from Holy Cross. but this is like an incredibly big decision. What do I do next? And it's incredibly important. And looking back on my career, my gosh, like no one cares what I did like, 20 years ago. You, as I said, you build your career, as Justin said more articulately than me, over time, and ideally with some intention. But you don't have to layer in so much stress and so much anxiety about every specific move, certainly not one coming out of college, in your first role, or would you make a decision to go back to school. I would say just earn as much experience as you can. And that doesn't necessarily need to be job experience. You're at a time in your life where you're not as attached, where you probably don't have as much overhead, as much tying you down to a particular place. Go travel, go volunteer, go, do something now that you can't do. For me, that was living abroad, and that was deciding to pick up and move to Switzerland in a French-speaking region where I didn't even speak the language. So having that experience to help, like really suffer through and struggle through that was incredibly formative, not just for my career, but for life, So I would say don't stress would be my answer to that question. Looking back, I think there was so much stress and so much anxiety very early on about making the right moves and being afraid to make the wrong ones. Looking back, it was not necessary. Like, just make a move, earn experience, and don't stress too much about what your first steps are.
Great. Well, thank you both for answering those questions about overcoming setbacks and about what you wish you had known you'd started before you started your careers. So with that, if we don't have any more questions, just wanted to thank both of our panelists for their time this evening. We really appreciate it. I think as a member of the staff at Holy Cross, it is always a delight to see that the mission of the university to really like be a man and woman of service for others is something that just transcends being a student at Holy Cross and really continues on into the different jobs that you hold, into the different commitments that you make for the rest of your life. So thank you both really for your time this evening. To our students, thank you for your time and attention. And for those of you that are watching this recording at a later point, please feel free. Center for Career Development is always available to help answer any questions you might have about the resume process, applying for jobs, navigating internships, and even networking. So we're here to support you every step of the way. And thank you all for your time this evening.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.